the ones who built the Black Ship itself. And now they knew the ship was awake again. They knew it remembered. And they were coming to finish what they started. Rhaegor's voice broke over comms, panic barely restrained. New contacts. Not the fleet outside. Something larger, cutting into real space without warning, folding in from angles sensors couldn't track. Ships that matched no records, no logs, no theories. Ships with hulls carved from the same alloy lining the hidden chamber below deck. The builders weren't sending emissaries. They were sending themselves. Kaler's rifle snapped up, barrel leveling at the figure on the table, but Vaedron's hand caught the barrel, holding it down. Killing it wouldn't matter. The ship already knew. It always knew. The Black Ship wasn't warning them. It was welcoming them. Every alarm blared at once, power grids failing in cascades, emergency lighting bathing the corridors in blood-red glow. The Black Ship folded its wings, energy draining inward, hull curling like a fist closing around a secret. Wyatt's voice cracked in the silence. What do we do? No one answered. Because no one knew if they were crew anymore or if they were just cargo. And somewhere in the dark, the builders knocked once, twice, and the Black Ship answered with a pulse so deep it shook the stars themselves. I don't trust it. Kyler's voice hit the room sharp, words edged like his grip on the rifle. This thing crawled out of the ship's guts like it owns the place. We put a bullet in it now, or we're digging our own graves. No one argued, but no one backed him either. Wyatt stared at the figure strapped down, skin still damp, eyes flickering between awareness and something deeper, like the ship was watching through them. The air felt heavier every second, like the walls leaned in just to hear the conversation. Lysera's hands shook, pretending to review scans, but all she saw was the genetic readout, looping the same result over and over. Human. Not human. Both. Neither. Its crew. Lysera forced the words out, knowing how they would land. Registered months ago. Lost in a breach near the forward gunnery section. But the tissue, it's integrated with the ship, like it's been growing down there the whole time. Then it's not crew. Kaler stepped closer, voice lower now, but colder. Crew dies. Crew stays dead. This is something else. Something the ship made because it's tired of waiting for us to catch up. You think I don't know that? Lysera's voice cracked, the pressure finally pulling at her composure. You think I haven't cut open enough bodies on this ship to know what's real and what's salvage? I know what this is. But I also know we can't shoot every ghost that crawls out of the dark. We don't have enough bullets for that. Vaedron hadn't spoken since they dragged the thing into the medbay, but her silence carried more weight than any argument. She leaned against the bulkhead, arms crossed tight, jaw clenched hard enough that the muscles jumped with every heartbeat. If the ship wants it alive, there's a reason. We need to know what it knows. Wyatt's fingers tapped restless patterns on his belt, old habit from ground deployments, counting seconds between artillery impacts. He wanted to agree. Wanted to trust the ship still worked for them. But deep in his gut, that trust had rotted out weeks ago, somewhere between the first time a bulkhead screamed in human voices and the moment he found his own blood type, registered in the ship's emergency medical systems before he even got wounded. What if it's not telling us anything? Wyatt's voice was quieter than the others, but it landed harder for it. What if it's just here to show us what's coming? No one answered. They all knew the truth. The Black Ship didn't waste resources. If it pulled something out of the dark, it meant they would need it, whether they understood why or not. The figure on the table stirred, fingers twitching like wires reconnecting, lips moving without sound. The comm system popped once, then every screen in the medbay filled with the same line of code repeating faster than human eyes could track. Lysera's voice went thin. That's not random. It's a countdown, Soren 4 said, head tilting in that unnerving way his neural implants always made too precise. It's not to impact. Not to system failure. It's a biological clock. His hand tapped the table beside the figure's head. This thing has a time limit. Kaler raised his rifle again. Then we end the timer now. Wait, Vadran's voice cut through, sharper than Kaler's threat. If the ship put a clock on it, that means it's synced to something. You shoot it. You might trigger whatever it's counting down to. So what? We let it wake up and hold our hands? Kaler's knuckles whitened around the grip. We've seen this play out before. Let the anomaly talk, and next thing you know, it's speaking through your mouth with your gun in your hand. I want to hear what it says. Wyatt stepped closer to the table, ignoring the way the air felt colder the nearer he got. If the ship's talking through it, it means the ship's scared. Lysera turned, confusion crossing her face. The ship doesn't get scared. It does now, Wyatt said, and the figure's eyes snapped open like a trigger had been pulled. Black from corner to corner, but deep inside something flickered memories, records, faces. Every dead crew member the black ship had ever carried looked back at them, layer upon layer, whispering through the eyes of the thing lying on the table. We were wrong. The voice that came out was too many voices at once, but underneath the noise, it sounded like someone they used to know. Someone they might have buried if they still had time for burials. We thought they left us alone because we survived. They left us alone because we became something they couldn't recognize. Who left us alone? Vadran's voice was quiet now, like she was afraid to hear the answer. The builders. The figure smiled, a thin crack of expression that stretched skin too tight over something not quite bone. They don't recognize us anymore. We grafted too much alien steel, soaked too much corrupted blood into our skin. We stopped being prey. Then what are we now? Wyatt barely recognized his own voice asking the question. Proof, the figure said. Proof their perfect machine can break. Proof that flesh can learn to bite back. Lysera's screen blinked, new data, flooding in genetic drift patterns, hardware mutation rates, the black ship's internal systems, rewriting themselves faster than she could track. It wasn't just evolving. It was choosing a side. Is that why they're coming? Wyatt's throat felt tight, like the ship itself was trying to keep him from asking. No, the figure said, smile gone now. They're coming because the war was never meant to end with survivors. It was supposed to end with silence. And we're too loud. The lights flickered again, but this time the flicker came with impact, something massive dropping out of fold space, close enough that the ship's hull vibrated with the arrival shockwave. Rhaegor's voice broke over comms, words running fast and sharp. New contacts. No transponder. No match. They're broadcasting. I don't know what this is. It's not language. It's pressure. Pressure. Wyatt knew that word too well. From ground fights, the feeling just before orbital strikes, when the air itself pulled tight and the world forgot how to breathe. The figure's hand lifted, not struggling against the restraint, just tapping a single finger against the table in rhythm, with the countdown still ticking on every screen. How much time do we have? Wyatt asked. The figure's smile came back, wider now, teeth too sharp, voice too calm. Enough to know it won't matter. Kaler swore and turned away, back slamming against the bulkhead, rifle sagging in his grip. We can't fight something we can't even name. We don't have to, the figure said. We just have to make them bleed first. The power cut out completely, plunging the medbay into darkness. And in that darkness, the ship whispered not in code, not in alien tongue, but in the voice of every dead crew member, every ghost welded into its hull. Prepare to board. Prepare to be boarded. Prepare to become the weapon. Wyatt didn't know if the words came from the ship, the figure, or his own mind anymore. the difference stopped mattering. Because outside, something ancient knocked against the hull, and for the first time in its long, brutal life, the black ship knocked back. The ship's internal gravity shifted, not a malfunction, but a deliberate recalibration, pressing everyone's bones slightly heavier into the deck plates. It wasn't normal. Nothing about the black ship was, but this was something new, something that felt purposeful. Every metallic surface hummed at a frequency just below hearing, a tremor threading through the walls, like the ship itself had started breathing differently. Lysera's console flared with error codes she'd never seen, strings of data wrapped around glyphs no human system was programmed to generate. Before anyone could speak, the medbay table liquefied beneath the restrained figure, not spilling like molten metal, but folding, warping into a liquid-solid hybrid that suspended the body mid-air. The restraints dissolved into the surface, becoming tendrils of programmable matter that read nerve impulses directly from skin contact. The ship didn't need monitors anymore. It was reading the figure's mind directly and feeding that data into every active system at once. Kyler slammed a hand against the bulkhead to steady himself, his grip slipping slightly as the surface under his palm softened, adapting to his touch. The black ship's adaptive hull had always been responsive, but this was more than adaptive plating. It was alive in a way no one had ever seen materials, rearranging at molecular speeds, neural geolayers beneath the floor pulsing like veins. The ship wasn't just hosting them anymore. It was integrating them. In the command core, Vadran stood frozen, watching the forward displays as the unknown contact outside reconfigured itself in real time. What had first appeared as a singular vessel now unfolded like a fractal bloom, smaller structures unfurling from its surface, each one acting like an independent craft, but all linked by a central core that existed partially outside normal space. The ship couldn't get a full lock on its position because parts of it existed in overlapping dimensions, operating like a swarm controlled by a central will. Sarin IV's implants pulsed warnings into his vision, his neural mesh unable to parse the input. It wasn't just an alien ship, it was a transdimensional relay, a craft that had never fully committed to a single universe. Every time the black ship's sensors tried to map its systems, the readings shifted, giving glimpses of technologies that flickered between incomprehensible and extinct. "They're not sending weapons," Sarin IV said, his voice too calm for what he was seeing. "They're sending rewrites." "Explain." Vadran's jaw barely moved, her gaze still locked on the display. "They're not going to board us with soldiers." Sarin IV's augmented eyes flickered as his implants fought to keep up. "They're going to overwrite our systems. Not just the ship. Us. Ourselves, our memories, our entire state of existence." Lysera's hands flew across her console, pulling every system log, every structural integrity scan. The ship's outer layers were already changing, reactive armor pulling back, exposing deep latticework underneath structures none of them had seen before. The black ship had always been a patchwork of salvaged alien tech, human design, and things no one could fully explain. But now, it was rearranging itself into something new, something prepared for whatever was knocking outside. The liquid metal surface beneath the suspended figure thickened, pulling its limbs apart into a crucifix-like spread, each arm and leg connected to flexible tendrils of memory metal that pulsed with coded light. The figure's skin darkened, veins filling with something that glowed faintly from within a blend of nanite slurry and biologic gel, the same compound used to repair hull breaches, now rewriting flesh and bone into something compatible with the ship's changing systems. The voice that came from the figure was no longer purely human. It was layered the ship, the figure, and something else speaking through both. "They thought you would never evolve," it said, mouth barely moving. "They thought entropy would finish you before you reached this point." Wyatt stepped closer, fighting the urge to flinch as the floor shifted under each step, adjusting density to match his weight. "What point?" "The point where you stop being passengers," the voice said, "and become weapons." Kaler's rifle shifted in his hands, the surface of the grip flowing like water before hardening again. The black ship wasn't just adapting to itself, it was adapting to them. Every piece of gear, every implant, every scrap of tech fused into their bodies was now part of the ship's adaptive loop. There was no separation between crew and vessel. They were all components of the same organism. Outside, the alien swarm ship extended a filament-thin arm, not a weapon, but a probe, threading directly into the black ship's hull without breaking the surface. Data poured in both directions, a two-way infection, neither side able to prevent the exchange. Wyatt's vision blurred, images flashing through his mind, battles that hadn't happened yet, technologies that didn't exist, memories that belonged to the black ship itself. "They're not here to kill us," the voice said from the suspended figure. "They're here to see if we're ready." "Ready for what?" Lysera's voice was barely above a whisper. "Ready to stop being human." Vadran's hands clenched at her sides, blood leaking from her palms, where her nails dug too deep. "We're not surrendering." "It's not surrender," the voice said. "It's adaptation." They left the ship behind, not as a weapon, but as a seed. It was never just about survival. It was about seeing how far you would go to survive. The probe filament pulsed once, and every system in the black ship shut down for a single second. Lights, gravity, life support, everything died. In that second, everyone aboard felt their own bodies shift slightly, bones resonating at a frequency that didn't belong to flesh, blood thickening with trace elements of the ship's reactive gel, thoughts briefly overlaid with machine logic. When the systems came back, nothing looked different, but everything felt wrong. The air tasted metallic, sounds echoed in ways they shouldn't, and every surface had a faint, oily sheen, like the whole ship had been reborn through a filter they couldn't perceive. "What did they do to us?" Wyatt asked, voice rough. "They made you compatible," the figure said, smile sharp enough to cut. "For what?" Kaler's voice cracked slightly, the first sign of fear breaking through his armor. "For the next step." The external sensors flared, showing dozens more signals dropping out of fold space, not reinforcements for the alien swarm ship, but echoes of the black ship itself. Every abandoned derelict, every lost vessel that had once been part of humanity's desperate war, now returned, their hulls twisted into variations of the same adaptive hybrid the black ship had become. They weren't ships anymore. They were living weapons, each one carrying a crew just like them, humans half digested by their own machines, fused into the bones of their vessels. "We're not fighting alone, Soren 4, said Fawars, no comfort in the thought. "No," the voice from the figure agreed. "You're fighting against yourselves." The lights flickered again, but this time it wasn't a system failure. It was communication. Morse code, in pulses of light, transmitted directly through the ship's internal circuits. Wyatt stared at the pattern, realization sinking like a stone in his gut. "It's not a rescue fleet," he said. "It's a purge." Every ship that had failed to adapt, every crew that had resisted integration, was coming back not to help, but to erase the black ship and everyone aboard. The builder's final test wasn't survival. It was extermination. Only one version of humanity would leave this system. Wyatt's fingers curled into fists, nails biting into skin that wasn't entirely human anymore. The black ship wasn't just a vessel. It was a crucible. And the only way out was through fire. "Prepare for boarding action," Vadran ordered, voice steady despite everything. "We hold this ship, or we burn with it." Outside, the swarm ships and the returning fleet began their approach, and inside the black ship, the figure on the table opened its eyes wide, pupils full of star charts, blood full of war, mouth full of orders the crew wasn't ready to hear. "Don't fight to survive," it said. "Fight to become." The first impact rocked the ship, and the lights went red. The hull screamed as something tore into it, not a weapon, but a directed fold in space, a surgical intrusion that pulled sections of the black ship into overlapping layers of reality. Wyatt staggered, the floor twisting beneath his boots as the air rippled like heat haze, turning solid walls into liquid light for a fraction of a second. His weapon's targeting system flickered uselessly, the reticle unable to decide what plane of existence it belonged to. The ship wasn't being boarded. It was being dissected, one deck at a time, each section split and rest-stitched at impossible angles. Kaler braced against the bulkhead, every surface slick with condensation as moisture boiled out of the air under the strain of dimensional overlap. His rifle buckled in his grip, the alloy stretching unnaturally before hardening again, the black ship's adaptive systems trying to protect his gear from the same invasive rewrite attacking the hull. The enemy didn't need to breach the ship. They were unraveling it from the inside out, making the very concept of inside meaningless. In the command core, Vadran's hands flew across controls that no longer responded to touch, the interface bleeding into her skin instead, reading muscle twitches and nerve impulses directly. External displays showed the incoming fleet, not advancing in formation, but flowing like liquid metal, ships merging and splitting with each maneuver, no longer distinct vessels, but a coherent organism wearing 1,000 hulls at once. Each was a different evolutionary outcome, a failed or successful adaptation that had either embraced the black ship's legacy or been consumed by it. Lysera's console dissolved beneath her fingers, reforming into a pulse organ that beat in sync with her own heart, each rhythmic thud feeding into the ship's sensor array. What she saw made no sense. The black ship was being rewritten at the molecular level, yes, but not by the enemy alone. Something inside the ship had woken, something that had been waiting for this exact moment. The hull, the systems, even the crew, they were all part of an ancient recursion loop, one designed to test how far a species would go to survive. But the test had already run its course. The black ship had been here before. They had been here before. Sarin 4's neural feed glitched violently, dumping corrupted memory fragments into his augmented brain. He saw flashes of the crew not as they were, but as they could have been in 1,000 failed futures. Some had fused fully with the ship, becoming biomechanical conduits, hardwired into the structure. Others had resisted integration, their bodies calcified into twisted monuments of refusal, sealed in bulkheads like fossilized warnings. Every time the ship had faced this test, the result had been different. No timeline had ever reached true survival. Every path ended in either surrender to the ship or annihilation by the fleet. The probe filament still threaded into the hull pulsed again, but this time the response came from deep inside the black ship's core, a subroutine buried beneath layers of restricted memory, something older than human occupation. The ship wasn't just a vessel left behind by unknown builders. It was a recursive trap, a self-resetting battlefield designed to force a species into rewriting itself until no trace of its original form remained. The test wasn't about strength. It was about identity. How much of themselves would they sacrifice to persist? Wyatt's breath came hard, every inhale dragging air through lungs that didn't feel entirely his. His fingers flexed, the skin pulling tighter over bones that felt sharper than they should have been. Whatever the ship had injected into them was still working, rewriting cellular structures at speeds biology couldn't match. It wasn't infection. It was evolution, forced through at the edge of a knife. He didn't need a medical scan to know his DNA wasn't human anymore, at least not entirely. The suspended figure on the medbay table twisted violently, joints bending in ways no living body could tolerate. Its skin peeled back, revealing layers of alien script etched directly into muscle tissue coordinates, ship schematics, and a single directive that burned itself into the minds of everyone aboard. Return to origin. The black ship hadn't been drifting aimlessly when humanity found it. It had been trying to go home, back to the place it was first born, back to the point where the recursion loop began. Vadran's voice came over the intercom, taut with fury and clarity. If this is a test, we fail it our way. The ship's internal defenses surged to life, bulkhead turrets pivoting toward points where reality had thinned the most, firing not projectiles, but bursts of phase-locked entropy weapons designed to collapse unstable folds and seal dimensional breaches. The black ship wasn't surrendering to the rewrite. It was biting back. Lysera shouted from the science deck, her voice shaking. It's not enough. They're not trying to destroy us anymore. They're trying to replace us. The incoming fleet stopped firing conventional weapons. Instead, they began transmitting a signal directly into the ship's core, a series of harmonic pulses designed to overwrite the crew's neural patterns, replacing thoughts, memories, and identities with a standardized template. It was species-level malware, a reset code for an entire race. Soren 4's implants screamed with countermeasures, firewalls burning out faster than they could regenerate. His mind filled with fragments of someone else's life memories, of stars he'd never seen, battles he'd never fought, loves he'd never lost. The black ship wasn't just adapting their bodies. It was rewriting their pasts, blending every version of every crew that had ever served aboard into a single continuous lineage. No individual crew had ever passed the test. But maybe all of them combined could. Wyatt gritted his teeth as a memory not his own forced itself into focus, standing on a shattered bridge, a gun in his hand, aiming at someone he couldn't see, pulling the trigger again and again while the ship screamed around him. The face in front of him shifted endlessly. Kaler, Vadran, Lysera, Soren 4, every version of every crew member that had ever fought this fight, all of them ending in the same place. The test didn't end with survival. It ended with betrayal, with one crew member choosing the ship over the others. Kaler caught his eye across the corridor, and Wyatt knew instantly that Kaler saw it too, that fragment of memory, that inevitable choice. One of them would be the betrayer. One of them would choose to merge fully with the ship, to become its voice and will, and in doing so, condemn the rest. It was the only way to pass the test. Not strength. Not unity. Sacrifice. One mind fully given so the ship could carry its knowledge forward into the next recursion. The bulkheads groaned as the fleet began their final approach, not firing weapons, but extending docking umbilicals designed to merge systems directly. There would be no battle. Only absorption. The black ship had faced this moment before, and every time, someone had made the choice. Someone had chosen to become the ship's heart, its pilot, its eternal prisoner. The suspended figure on the table turned its head, and Wyatt saw his own face staring back at him, not a twin, not a clone, but a future self, one that had already made the choice. The ship was showing him the end of his own path, the moment where he gave up his name, his identity, his humanity, and became nothing but the voice of the black ship itself. Vadran's voice broke through the comm again. We fight until we have no bones left to break. Wyatt raised his rifle, even though he knew bullets meant nothing now. The choice wasn't between winning and losing. It was between keeping his humanity and keeping his crew. The black ship's hum filled his skull, a low, hungry note vibrating his teeth, waiting for him to speak the words that would end the recursion. I'm not ready, he whispered, knowing the ship could hear every breath. The figure on the table smiled with his mouth. You've already done it. The first umbilical latched onto the hull, and the lights dimmed to black,